Good afternoon to those of you who are in Europe and Africa, and good morning to those of you who are in the United States joining us, and welcome to the panel on Connecting Realities to Champion Protection of Civilians. My name is Marla Keenan. I'm a senior fellow at the Stimson Center, where I focus on NATO and the important work that they are doing to implement their 2016 Protection of Civilians policy, which is graciously supported by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Over the past decade and a half of my career, I have focused on working with organizations that research the impact of war on civilians. And while much of the research itself happens within conflict areas, the goal always is to link the civilians who live through conflict with those in the halls of power who can make change on their behalf. This panel is focused just on that and on connecting these diverse realities to ensure that civilians are better protected in current and future conflicts. I've been struck a bit this week by just how many times we've heard from our panelists discussing the disconnect between what happens on the ground and what happens in capitals around the world, especially in places where there are assumptions about high-level policies and how those are made and decided upon and how they affect civilians on the ground. For example, on Wednesday, we heard about the Afghan withdrawal and just how civilians were completely caught off guard and they had no way to know what they should do, how to protect their families, how to get out, or just how to stay safe where they were. I continue to do evacuation work to this day as a volunteer, and it really is concerning to me just how much, in the United States, which is where I live, just how much our policymakers are learning from volunteers just like me every day. Before I get started on introducing our amazing speakers here, I want to do just a couple of very quick housekeeping things. The first is please post your questions on Slido. I think we see that many people are engaged this morning and we're seeing some questions already coming in, so thank you for that. They will be moderated by our staff here, and then they will be fed to us so that we can try and answer as many as we can. Please visit the speakers tab, because while I'm going to give a brief introduction to each of our colleagues here, I will not be able to touch on all of the amazing things that they've done in their career. The last part of the platform has the resource library. Again, there are lots of resources from the organizations that you see supported here, talking to policy papers and briefing papers about the topics that we're going to discuss today. There's a help desk in case you need it. And also, please, if you're inspired by the discussions that you hear today, we'd love to hear from you on social media, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn. Please feel free to tag PAX Protection of Civilians, or PAX PoC 2021. That's the hashtag. I think, just one more last note. Please remember that this event is being recorded and that it will be available online afterwards. So all that we're saying here is public information. Okay, let's get started. I'm incredibly honored today to be joined by two colleagues from Iraq and Chad and two representatives from the Dutch government. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to briefly introduce you now, but again, I encourage you to read their complete bios on our website. So Dr. Ghassan Jawad Kadhim is a political advisor and analyst of politics in the Middle East. He was the former political advisor to the Minister of Interior and is currently the Foreign Relations Advisor to the National Security Advisor. He is also the official focal point between the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, and the Office of the National Security Advisor. Dr. Olivier Guiryanan is from Chad and is a social anthropologist. He is also the executive director of BUCOFORE. Olivier focuses his research and interests on the security sector in the Sahel. Lars Walrave is the director of international affairs at the Dutch Ministry of Defense. He attended officer training school at the Royal Netherlands Naval College and obtained a doctorate in international law from Utrecht University. Lars has fulfilled various operational and staff positions within the Royal Netherlands Navy. After more than a decade in various positions at the Directorate of Kingdom Relations, he returned to the Ministry of Defense at the beginning of 2019. Marriët Schuurman is the Director of Stability and Humanitarian Aid in the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Previously, she acted as the Human Rights Ambassador of the ministry and coordinated the Dutch membership of the UN Security Council in 2018. Between 2014 and 2017, she served as NATO's Special Representative for Women, Peace, and Security And until 2014, she was the Dutch ambassador to the Republic of North Macedonia. So, Ghassan, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure actually to be part of this panel, which includes experts and expertise from Netherlands, of course, as official attendees, and from Chad, my colleague Olivier. And thank you very much for PAX to offer this opportunity actually to express ideas and to express network and exchange network between others. I will start in wording in Arabic, and I need translation from you both actually to translate it. إن شاء الله بكرة راح نسافر إلى تركيا ونخلص كل أمورنا بإذن الله وراح نرجع نتواصل وياكم. It's so difficult to translate it because you need kind of interpreter to attend and to translate to you the exact word. Maybe I said it in a slang language, and actually I said, thank God that we finished everything and we are leaving to Istanbul tomorrow morning. But what I'm trying to say, the language is, in my area, in my region, is not just about text or interpreting. It's history, it's religion. So when you learn the language, you will learn the culture. And when you learn the culture, as our previous panelist, the general, mentioned, it's how to engage with others. And actually, it seems that our main topic talking about the engagement and the right information between the culture or the war or the conflict zone and the capitals. And there is an area, a blurry area between them missing. It's a gap of information, or maybe bureaucracy. Maybe there is some information sent from the ground to the capitals, but it takes like days, maybe minutes, maybe hours. But minutes for people's lives, it's means. And I remember that we have like hundreds of examples of how important to involve the culture and how important to make that links between the capitals and the ground. And I remember too many cases, not just Hawija, our main topic here. For instance, in 1991, we have as they call it, the liberation of Iraq, if I may say, the liberation of Kuwait, actually. They attack a shelter full of people, full of families at that time, during the time of President Bush, the junior. The shelter includes many of families, and of course, the reason behind that attacks with the clever rockets, or technical rockets, they said there is a government officials at that time being part of that Amariya shelter. And many cases came after, for instance, the siege in our country since 1991 till 2003. Too many kids has been passed away because of lack of milk. And when they ask Miss Madeleine Albright, is it worth that 500,000 kids passed away, to get rid of Saddam Hussein? She said it's worth it. What I'm saying, what past is past, but people think about their families and their blood. Yes, you might do your attack and turn your face to other page or signing, for instance, the daily work. But there's family suffering in that area. You should always be aware about them. You should always think that these family will reflect badly on the future, will back to you on many ways of revenge, if I may say. Ways of revenge against your country or against the society. I will mention a kind of successful case, actually, of solving, being kind of a solver of problem, and let me know if I passed the time, actually, because I will talk in Arabic again. It happens in 2008 that we have an election, provincial council election, and one of the provinces includes kind of sectarian, or let's say entity conflicts between Kurds and Arabs in Mosul. And after the winning of the seats at the provincial council, they refused to sit on one table as a council to work on the provincial council level. And the UN representative, the embassies, they've been struggled to make them sit together on one table. At that time, I was working with the International Republican Institutes, the IRI, and I've been appointed to be kind of in charge of something called special projects, which is anything difficult, they send me, to that place. And I was approaching both sides, and with help of the embassy, U.S. Embassy, because it's out of our IRI scope of work, fund, of course, we got fund to gather everybody together in Istanbul and to sit on the first session, the first table together to start solving the problem. It's an example of successful approach from the ground to solve a ground issue or ground conflicts from a capital, from outside capital. And I can give another example, but maybe when we come to the other questions, especially the NATO mission in Iraq, I can tell you another example of successful story, and we will come to the bad stories too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Olivier.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to make mine the recommendation of my colleague Ghassan, and I will start by maybe to introduce to you the key issues, the security issues in the Sahel. So first of all, I would like to introduce to you my country, Chad, because the audience may not know what is Chad. Chad is a country surrounded by the big hotspots, security hotspots in Africa. You know, we share 1,000 kilometers with the Libya, and in the south we have Central Africa, which is facing various armed groups also inside. And in the west, we have Darfur, the Darfur region, and in the west of the country, you know, we have the Lake Chad Basin. So we are surrounded by the big hotspots, security hotspots in Africa. So it can justify our engagement in the main international fights against terrorism. In Mali, since 2013, Chad has been provided troops to the United Nations missions. Also, the G5 forces. We are providing forces to Niger and also to the region called the Liptako-Gourma zone. So we can regard us as a linchpin of the struggle against terrorism and also the criminal groups in the Sahel. But I think that's our positive strength in terms of engagement, international engagement against terrorism, but also in terms of basic rights. We are known as a country of bans. So, you know, internet or network, social networks, shutdowns are common, and it is forbidden to demonstrate in Chad. You know, so if you are hungry or you don't accept any unjust law, you have to die, because it is not possible for you to demonstrate. And I would like to mention the role of international actors in this area, in this environment. As we are the linchpin of the international fight against terrorism. We have been enjoying many international support from France, from the US, and also from the Dutch government, because in 2019, the Dutch government opened the diplomatic office in N'Djamena. And I think that the added value of your presence in our country is that the first diplomat that served as the local focal point in Chad was a great man, because he brought an idea that it is important for the Western countries to provide us with intelligence support, also with military support, but it is extremely important to support local NGOs in order to help people better understand what is going on. So I think that we are this country that is very big in terms of war experience, because the first rebellion started in 1963. It means 3 years after the independence gain. So we are very experienced in rebellions and what is wrong for the development initiatives. So we need solid institutions. I mean, we need democracy, because during 40 years, we are experiencing, dictatorship. The president has died in front after 30 years of ruling, and now we have his son as a president, a traditional president, and we are witnessing some actions that will lead us to the presidency family to keep the lead of the country in terms of power sharing. So these are our local and also Sahelian challenges that we have to overcome in order to expect better peace for this region. So I have shown already the attacks against civilians. Even the regular forces are a big threat for the civilians in this region. So when you want to support security forces, you have to also demand human rights respect in order to better change the situation in the Sahel. So thank you very much, and I can answer any question you would like to ask me.
Great. Lars.
Well, yes, thank you. Thank you for having me here, and I think it's good to change perspectives and discuss this. I think protection of civilians is a theme which, we're never done learning. And a theme that constitutes an important part of our work. Our mission in the Dutch Ministry of Defense is to protect what holds us dear. So that's, of course, civilians. And our soldiers, our men and women, are required to perform their duties, of course, in very difficult circumstances, work under high pressure, perform to the best of their ability, with the knowledge and the capabilities they have, always with partners or mostly with partners. And I think they're very well aware of the responsibility they have on their shoulders. They have been trained for this, they've been educated for this. But despite of this, civilians can be harmed in conflict. And this is an honest but a painful reality. This is the truths we're having to deal with. But I think what we have to learn from this is that we always try to, improve our actions, continue to learn, evaluate, and that we have conversations like we have today about what we can improve on what we do for our work, for our jobs. A lot has been said yesterday, especially on Hawija, Dutch bombardment on a bomb factory during the night of 2 to 3 June 2015. It's had a great impact, first and foremost on the local and civilian population, but be assured also on the Dutch military and defense organization. And we need and we wish to learn from what happened over there. What next steps can we take? What can we do? and which I'm a bit proud of to mention. We had intense parliamentary debates on Hawija, not this year, the year before. And from it comes a conversation, a series of conversations with NGOs, PAX in the lead, together with us, the Ministry of Defense. We had several sessions talking to each other, trying to learn from each other, not always agreeing with each other, I have to agree as well, but at least talking to each other, which is part of the process, I think. And what we do now is we made up a set of 10 recommendations, what we learned from these discussions, where we can improve, what can we do, can we be more transparent, can we, whatever. So this set is almost ready. It's on the desk of our minister. So it's another way for us to learn from what happens in real life, which, we hope to we try to prevent, and if not, be more transparent on what we do and how we do it and why we do it. So that's the way we're trying to work with these difficult themes, and especially for the people on the ground, the civilians on the one side, and the military professionals on the other hand, from which we can demand as well. They do their work to their best extent and with the best methods and things we can give them to do their jobs honestly and in the best way.
Okay, great. Thank you. Marriët?
Yeah, I would like to pick up on Lars' point on learning, because I think it's really what Ghassan and Olivier and Lars said, but also General Stavridis in the interview. This has been a long process of learning, and it's important to have the different perspectives with respect for each other's mandates, for each other's knowledge and experience, but to do ever better on protection of civilians. And if there's one thing that I learned from working with the military on protection of civilians, it's indeed, as General Stavridis also said, that protection of people is the core of our mandate in peacekeeping. I think it was General Daniel Safari from Rwanda, with whom we worked on protection of civilians, also in the peacekeeping reforms. He would indeed say, as a military, we were created to protect people, and it doesn't matter if it's my own people or the people of the country where I'm deployed. And I think General Kamart always said the same thing. If we're not here to protect people, what are we doing here? And so I think this sort of people-centered approach, it has been very much core to our learning journey on protection of civilians. And I think Stavridis said it really, really well. It's not only a fundamental thing, it's the right thing to do, because this is a people-centered, a rights-based approach. People need protection. It's living up to our international obligations, but it's also a smart thing to do, a pragmatic thing to do, and an efficient thing to do. I think for us, the integrated approach that was already mentioned, to work from the different perspectives to this common goal and common obligation that we have to uphold international humanitarian law and to protect people, whoever is in danger, to bring together these different perspectives in a coordinated, integrated, comprehensive approach is a very critical one, because that will allow us to do better. We get smarter and more innovative if we bring those different perspectives together. But first and foremost, I think the lessons learned is really to listen to the needs of the people and to understand, as you said, in terms of understanding the culture and the language, the impact that we have through our presence and want to avoid, or how to have the impact we want to have, which is in the end, a safe and secure environment and lasting peace and security for the people at risk, and how we can deliver better on that promise by working better together. So it is a complicated things. It's a very dynamic field. We continue learning and doing better, learning a lot from mistakes, unfortunately. I would say, but at least, we try to improve better in terms of cooperation, but also to do better in terms of involving and engaging with the population to understand their security needs, to deliver better on those and adapt to those. And I think really to gradually evolve, really to put people first. And I think this is another big lesson. Not only that by having a comprehensive approach, we perform better, we have better solutions, but also by putting people first in everything we do, be it in peace building or in peacekeeping or in development or in access to justice and accountability. Putting people first is a common goal, but it helps us to deliver better and to do even ever better in terms of protecting people. So again, I think protection of civilians is a core task, it's a core mandate, it's a shared responsibility, and it really requires the different perspectives and the different actors to come together and to see what we can do better in terms of really fulfilling the security needs of the people that we need to protect. And maybe I'm always jealous with the mission of my Ministry of Defense. I wish it was the mission of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is to protect everything that's dear to us. And I think that's our job, that's the common challenge. And that's why we need to bring back together different perspectives, and particularly the perspectives of the local people.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. That was actually really interesting because I heard you both talking about how broad sort of the protection landscape is in a given country and how diverse it can be and how challenging it can be. And then I heard both of you talk about, as a team, working together between the two. And protection of civilians is not just something the military does, right? We know this. It's something that's sort of a comprehensive approach, as the Admiral said. And so I'm going to take just a moment to mention something about NATO and their protection of civilians policy, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and certainly in Iraq it touches on your country, and certainly the countries that are involved in NATO also have a role to play in Chad. But their protection of civilians policy is very much rooted in that human security sort of space that you were talking about, creating a safe and secure environment. And I wonder if perhaps the two of you together could answer a little bit, like how is the role of a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, and a Ministry of Defense? How do you negotiate that space and know who's responsible for what when you're really looking at a very comprehensive protection conundrum, if you will?
That's a very large question. But I'm happy you mentioned, I think that we share the concept, that's the starting point, of human security. Mm-hmm. Understanding that conflict and also peacekeeping has an impact, not only a direct impact on people in terms of the risk of loss of life, loss of infrastructure, but also indirect secondary effects, trauma, but also loss of livelihoods, loss of access to education and health. Mm-hmm. And that has a long impact on the resilience of people and their ability to recover and rebuild a better future. So I think, as I said, having this human people first lens basically helps us with respect from the difference in the mandate that we have and the different of tools we have in our toolkit to at least to agree on the common goal. So I think that's why the concept of human security is so important, that we know what the common goal is, but we also know that we have different mandates and where we can strengthen each other and help each other in delivering better on our respective mandates.
Great.
To add on a maybe more practical note, it's first and foremost about understanding the conflict, what's ongoing, what's needed. It might be a more military-focused solution, but it's not always only military. It's always the whole set of skills, methods, means, capabilities we have, and we really discuss this in between us. We have in the Netherlands this group, civil servants, MFA, justice, Prime Minister's office, defense, and we discuss these things. Okay, if we see there's a problem, I can mention Sahel. Of course, we're looking at Sahel. We're there present in different forms, but in small amounts. But then we look at, what's really needed and how can we help in a way that really helps. And sometimes it's more, development focused, sometimes it's more military focused, but then make sure there are others that take the other role. So that's always, something to be taken into account and to be discussed between, the different involved ministries in the Netherlands.
Okay,
sure.
Great. I'm going to head to the questions over in Slido now. The first one that I see here says, Admiral Stavridis argues that a champion country should build a center of excellence on POC and that this could be something that the Netherlands might consider leading. Do you agree? I think that would be more... Certainly we understand you can't oblige your whole of government today, but your personal view maybe.
I'll make it easy for you and start off.
Thank you.
And I cannot speak for the Ministry of Defense. Because it has been coming up before. And when I was a NATO representative for Women, Peace and Security, I had the privilege to also be given the file of protection of civilians and the NATO policy and the doctrine and the whole trajectory. And actually, the Netherlands already has a center of excellence that played a critical part in that development of that doctrine, which is the center of excellence on civil-military cooperation. I would argue, because there's already many centers of excellence, that we should use the ones that we already have that can champion this. And as I said, the Netherlands is one of the champions, definitely not all, within the NATO community amongst allies. And we already have, I think, a center of excellence that has an excellent a reputation, and that already has been critical in developing policies, guidelines, and training. So, yeah.
To add, I think it's more about what we do than the form we choose for it. So it's about the contribution we can deliver, the things we do, the acts we can do together, instead of having a center of excellence, which might do nothing. So I think that's more important for me than having this institution. I think it's important to have this theme on the agenda, to be active on it. But will this really require a center of excellence? This is something that you can grab or people put in. I don't know. If it adds, maybe, but not at this moment, I think.
Okay. I actually want to come back to you, Ghassan. I want to ask if you'd be willing to share that story that you shared with me yesterday about NATO and sort of the interaction that
I thought she will ask me about shopping, but anyway.
We do this afterwards.
I need just to back on one thing that we've been, that actually, excuse my cynical here, you've been talking about learning. And actually, for you, it's learning. We are not school, to learn from us. Since 80s, we are facing mistakes till now, and you couldn't learn lesson. When you going to learn? That's a question in my mind. Does your learning process have timing? Or you should have a mistake and you will say, I will learn. Okay, I will learn from that mistake and will continue the same mistake. It happens in 2007, Blackwater attack civilians in my city. And it was a mistake. And sorry is not enough. To pay money for the victims or casualties, it's a cheap thing. It's very cheap. As we rely on the previous panel a lot, we should share this, the condolence. We should go to the place of sadness. The people who lost their life by incidents, as you call it. In my opinion, it's a mistake. And back on sharing information between the ministries as a government of Netherlands. I'm sorry, I will not talk in behalf of your government, but I think every government has an embassy. Each embassy has a security representative. That means the Minister of Defense or Ministry of Interior or maybe Intelligence. And that means there is a cooperation between both, actually. And there is a lot of learning process and sharing of information between the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Defense. But the government of Netherlands knows about Hawija after 4 years and a half. So where is the sharing of information here? So this is what makes me feel that there's some issue with your communication, and your communication make us pay blood. But anyway, back to Marla's story. Because I was appointed with the NSA as his foreign affairs advisor, because I'm good looking on camera actually. So it happens that the NATO mission start their work in Iraq as a training organization in 2005. But as a legitimate existence, there is no legitimate existence for NATO. But after the talks about the withdrawal and the voting happens in our parliaments, it seems that there is a need of a mission like NATO to be in our country. For us, it's more training and consultation, which is the same thing with the coalition currently. But with the coalition, there's a lot of kind of stories and blurry areas with the coalition because they have like an operation side of it. So we've been talking about how we cooperate with the NATO and preparing for cooperation memorandum of understanding between the two governments. And of course, the system of NATO takes like 30 countries, defense and politics side to agree, and that's very difficult, especially after the corona. We had prepared the paper for the cooperation between both sides. And I was not that involved on, legal part of the cooperation. But suddenly we heard through media that the General Secretariat of NATO mentioned very critical wording on media after the meeting, I think in Brussels, when he mentioned that we will have 4,500 fighters in Iraq. And we've been struggling telling the commander in Baghdad, don't talk about numbering. It's a very sensitive issue. So be aware about it. And he's supposed to report this information to his chain of command. That's create a big issue. And usually in Baghdad, there's kind of every hour there's some issue, to be breaking news. And because of we've been talking about the withdrawal of the coalition and the foreign forces, it's became like an issue that we are replacing the coalition with NATO mission. So it's like a joke for some people, why you are doing that. And that's create problem between the government of Iraq and the NATO that we will not sign between us, or they already signed, but we will not cooperate. That needs kind of a red line under the table to talk and communicate to reach out a solution. And it was had to me actually that I should be that person from the NSA and a political advisor from NATO. You'll be happy he's American. To communicate and sit together, talk about what happens, tell him about the culture and why they became very angry as Iraqis and how they can act. So we set some points to return the dignity to Iraqis that this is what happens and this is bad. We should change this commander and bring a new one because this commander was not following the Iraqi government as they suppose. And we end up with changing the commander, Danish commander, which is, I do respect his commanding, but it was kind of a political advisor of the commander or culture advisor born in Denmark. And they appoint him as a culture advisor. He's from Iraqi family, but he never been in Iraq. So they rely on these advices, but it was bad. And when they changed him, things has been get better and better. And eventually we agreed to sit together with the NSA and things has been shifted to a success. And there is no mentioning even about numbering anymore. And even our NSA mentioned that you can release the numbers because we are cooperating and we both have the same media report. So this is one of the successful arenas that I can share. If you allow me, Marla, there's another issue with American policy. If I may say, it's failed. They left people in cold after using the new way of soft power to use institutes, organizations to promote democracy in my country, because we came to democracy just in 18 years ago, unfortunately. I've been working with IRI since 2005, and for financial issues, political issues, they decide to close the office in 2013. I was kidnapped twice at that period, since 2005 till 2013. They've been bombing civil war in Iraq between 2005 2008. We've been facing a lot of issues, tribal issues, awakening, if you remember, Al-Qaeda. And in 2013, the organization decided just to close the office, and that's it. Bye. We left in cold. So it's the same example that the general mentioned about the Afghan. They can be good community for United States if you offer them opportunity. But Iraqis at that time with IRI, they've been angry because they left in cold. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Olivier for just a moment here, because I want to hear a little bit about the research that you've done on security systems in the Sahel, and if you see there the presence of any POC issues in that security training, particularly by Western forces.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like first to start by showing you our role in this environment. We are a research center. It means that we carry out researches on the security issues. And we advise donors in order to better help people, communities, and also the security forces. So, we are between donors and communities. But I would like to let you know that if you take the Sahelian countries, the G5 countries, Burkina, Mali, Niger, and Mauritania, can allow people carrying out studies on security issues and also the insecurity dynamics. But in Chad, it is like forbidden, because they don't want researchers, and they don't want people who don't belong to the security sector. So we face this challenge in our country to be accepted. How can we be accepted when people, the authorities don't want our results, they don't need our, research activities. So this is the first challenge. But fortunately, we are supported by the Western government, like Dutch government, and also the EU representative in Chad. So they sometimes give us opportunity to carry out studies in the development areas in order to fund our activities in the security sector. So that's what we are doing in this environment. And also, when you take the main Western countries represented in Chad, you have the U.S. that is the big support in military intelligence and also training of the military forces. You have France, its role in the Sahel, and also the EU, which is using the program approach to help security and reforms in the security sector. So you are the newcomers. When I say you, the Dutch government is a newcomer, and also many European countries have just opened the diplomatic bureaus in N'Djamena. So I think that with the massive presence of these actors, we hope that things will move, and also hope that the support in terms of diplomatic support and also security, because we are threatened, so we need the security protection. So things are going to move for the better for us. And also in terms of the security perception, the main narrative for the government is the fight against terrorism. Mm-hmm. And when we collected information about the perception of the security, the main concern is the food security. Mm. So people think that food security is the priority of the country, and the government thinks that the priority is the fight against terrorism. So we are helping people, donors, and other actors to better decide among these issues, and also many challenges to be overcome in this area. So it is what we are doing in a hostile context, and also with many actors that are queen with the dictatorship, and the Central Africa countries are ruled by the dictatorship. So broadly speaking, it is what I can put to your attention in terms of challenges.
Okay, great. I'm going to go back here to our Slido deck here. This is a question from Anonymous, and it says, excellent point by Mr. Kadhim that conflict zones are not learning environments. This points to the POC accountability gap. How can that best be addressed? I'm not sure who.
Yeah, I already wrote it down. If mistakes are made, we should learn from that, which means that we should not make them again. And that I fully agree. We should show that we make progress, that we don't make the same mistakes again. For Hawija, I don't know whether it's communication. I think it's more about transparency. That might have been a mistake. So that's what we're working on. And I can't promise that we'll be transparent on everything right away. Yeah? There might be military and operational reasons not to, but where we can, we already dealt with we talked with Parliament about it. We will share. We will be more transparent. We will be more open. Not always. That I have to add, but I think that's the important thing in it.
Okay. Do you have anything to add?
No, I was just thinking that I think we developed in Afghanistan some approaches which in NATO context, which can also be useful to see, to what extent, that those tools, and also asking external parties, like I think that in Afghanistan it's the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, who actually collects the data on civilian casualties. And that's open and out in the open public information, irrespective of who caused those civilian casualties. And that, I think, outside and independent pressure is very important to be accountable and, increase transparency and accountability. But also, obviously, everybody suffers, when these mistakes are made. And as you said, they're not cheap. They are very, very expensive. And I think that to have that external oversight can really help us to act sooner on, when these things happen and things go wrong, because, we cannot guarantee that it will never go wrong. But at least, we calculate beforehand to minimize the risks. And at the same time, if we see things go wrong, to analyze how could this happen, so, yeah. And so I think there again, there are contexts where we did better on this one. And that's also, I think, we have to see if those tools can help.
Great, thank you. This reminds me of a discussion around the POC policy back in the day at NATO. specifically focused around the making of amends. NATO had a non-binding guidelines on how to make amends if any of the countries did harm civilians, but that didn't make it into the policy, and that was a little heartbreaking for some of us, I think, because we knew how important it was in the context of when something happened, like what that meant. So I think some of us are still kind of trying to work, and I was struck by what the mayor said yesterday, that it was so important that even 6 years later, an apology and an honest, apology that comes with, this is something we're giving to your family, to acknowledge that. It's so important. I mean, it really does make a big difference. So sorry, just side note there. Back to our questions here. What is your view regarding discussions that the EU should have its own army that pop up from time to time, such as recently regarding the Afghanistan situation? I see you shaking your head.
Well, it's been a question for some time. The EU will not have its own army, just like NATO doesn't have its own army.
Right.
It's the nations that form NATO. It's the nations that form the EU. It's about, national sovereignty, of course. There's close cooperation, as is in NATO, and we're even cooperating more in the EU on defense matters. But this will, at least for the Netherlands, and I think many other EU nations will agree, will not be an EU army.
Okay, great. Let's see, another one for Marriët. Whoa, they keep moving. What risk may the integrated approach have in not recognizing the definitions of success that differ between military development and diplomacy?
I was struggling to understand the question, actually, but I think actually, I don't agree with the assumption that we don't have the same measure of success. But it very much links to Lars's earlier point, having a shared analysis and a shared, from there, a shared objective, shared goal, before you start to decide who's going to do what. And if, that specific tool in a toolbox is useful at all. Our intention, and that is the integrationist approach, is, from a shared analysis and a common objective, decide who's going to do what. So I think our shared definition of success is lasting peace and security for everybody globally, and that's what we try to work on.
Yeah, I think that's where that human security sort of broader lens comes in and is really quite helpful in looking toward the future. I mean, there are certain times when conflict is the situation, but I think...
Yeah, but I think the Admiral made it very clear as well. You have, that longer term perspective. You may not always with military means that may not be the right tool, and it may only be in the short term, but it has to be followed up with longer term interventions.
Or alternative.
In order to make it sustainable, or alternative interventions,
different plans together.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw a note on one of the questions before that just kind of made the point that security forces, or the pointy end of the spear, it's just one of the tools in the toolbox, right? And if you really want to have lasting success, it has to run the whole gamut of that comprehensive approach.
And it might change depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more military heavy, or sometimes it's more diplomacy heavy, or it's more aid development heavy. It's very much depending on the situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, one of the examples of different ways of security and peace. It's a huge example in Iraq after the civil war. One football game stops the civil war. It's when we win the championship, Asia championship, the war has been stopped because Sunnis, Shia, they've been together on streets and unarmed, and of course our way of festival and winning by using weapons, but it was kind of a different way of expressing, ways of peace. It's not always about using weapons. Actually, it's not always about using trainings, if I may say, because we trained a huge number of leaders. None of them currently in position, for instance, some of them, but it's it's how we understand the situation and prepare ourselves for different scenarios. This is my opinion about the champion peace champions, for instance, and it's came to my mind why you choose Netherlands as the champion of peace, for instance. Why Netherlands? The why it's standards. I mean, why it's not France, for instance? Why it's not Saudi Arabia? Why it's not Iran, for instance? Is there criteria for the peace champions? I mean, is there standards to choose that country? Or it should be kind of EU country? I'm sure that I will not reward visa again for Netherlands, but it's that issue. I mean, it's came to my mind. What is champion of peace? Why you want to be the champion? Okay, it's a reward, but it's better to be more ethically. It's better to be recognized from the others. It's like the Nobel rewards. It's like others. I mean, to be kind of the lead, I'm the champion for peace. Okay, why? Because you donate more, but your money did nothing on the ground. Because you did more trainings, okay? What is the result? What is the impact? So this is, I cannot understand, actually, Marla.
Well, that's actually a really interesting question that I think you may be posing to me a little bit as well. As an advocate who's worked on this for a decade and a half, I don't look to a country because they have a name or because they belong to a certain organization or group. I look to the countries who are willing to back up what they say with the resources and the expertise. Putting someone in NATO as the head of Women, Peace and Security is an amazing, that's an amazing thing to offer. I think those are the people that we look for, or not just the ones that say protection is important to us, but the ones who are willing to actually then go and pull their friends in and say, hey, this is an important issue to us. Here's why we think it's important to whatever regional or international organization that we're part of. And this is the work we're willing to do. And will you come along with us?
But I'm actually fascinated by your question, because what gives you the impression that the Netherlands sees itself as the champion for peace? Is that? But what I see, the way we look at it is, first of all, we're part of a coalition for peace, and I think we are a small country, so very pragmatically, we will never win our peace with military force, So we need a sort of more diplomacy and conviction to stay safe as well. But I think it's felt as a member of the international community that we have to play our part, like we expect others to play their part, to uphold the international rule of law and international peace, as one of the founding members of the United Nations. And we signed up, we the nations, having overcome the scourge of, preventing the scourge of war for future generations. So it's like, as a member of the international community, we signed up for that, so we have to do our part. But we would never do that alone, and we can't do that alone. But even the United States can't do that alone. And I think I heard Madeleine Albright, you referred to her, but I heard her say, we are indispensable, but not alone. And I think that's for all countries. We know we can never do this alone, but we feel we have to take our responsibility. And in our case, it's enshrined in our constitution. So, that we will uphold a rules-based international system to promote peace and security for everybody.
Yeah.
That's not in the lead, it's part of a coalition.
Or other call.
So it's a responsibility, but not to say, look at how great we are. So that's not what if you mean, if that's what you mean by champion, no. But again, I think so that is, it's very much the task that we are given also as civil servants, and particularly working on defense and diplomacy. This is our assignment, that we have to work with other countries to promote international peace and security. That's how I would see it.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
The next question is from Rachel Grimes, and I think she was referring to when you were speaking, so I'm going to direct this to you. What does the speaker advise on identifying and approaching senior officers who are still serving to champion POC in such a genuine way?
Interesting question. This is something, this is about internal transparency and discussion, I think. I think it's very important to start from the beginning, officers training already on whatever level. But it's good to have discussions, to learn from each other, to be open, to be accountable. I think that's most important. This is about, learning from your mistakes, being open, sharing your experiences. I think that's what helps. Or works.
I did no mistakes.
Neither did I.
Do you want to add to that, or?
I think that one of the things that made me think is that, which is a bit of a concern, we have gathered, experience from the Balkans, the Great Lakes region in Africa, Rwanda, all painful, experiences for humanity. And it is, I think, for all of us, really a precious task to make sure that the capacity and the leadership that came forward in those crises is recognized, and that we learn from that, that we embrace those. And with the short set of planning cycles that we have, and also political cycles that we have in all our countries, the risk is that leadership goes lost. And the capacities and the knowledge goes lost or isn't properly rewarded because we go for the next fashion. So I think that is for all us as institutions. I think it is first and foremost, to foster leadership, but also to make sure that we recognize it and build on it for future challenges, which is, challenges are constantly changing, but not to say, okay, now we move from region X to region Y, we'll start reinventing the wheel, for instance. So I think that's part of that's what I read in the question as well, and I fully agree that we have to make sure that all those that served in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Mali, that their expertise and experience and leadership is recognized, but also used for new challenges.
Yeah, it's absolutely my experience when I meet senior officers that the experience that they have lived in where they've been deployed, particularly like if you look at Eastern or European, organizations versus the U.S., for example, we don't deploy a lot to peacekeeping missions. So I see a very interesting dynamic between the experience that people have had and how they understand POC and what it means to them when they think about it. And it's a very personality-based and experience-based approach that I think people adopt. I have a question.
Which attaches great importance to the teams we have as well.
Absolutely.
And how we bring people together.
Yes, absolutely. I have a question for you, though I think it popped off, but I remember what it was in my brain. This is really challenging, actually. It's like playing a board game. So I think the question was about lessons learned in Afghanistan on security force assistance and POC, and if you see any way for those to kind of translate from the Afghanistan experience into the Sahel.
Okay. There are many similarities between Afghanistan and the Sahel zone, What do the international actors found in this area? It is the fight against, terrorism, jihadist groups. As a result, we have been witnessing the increase of the insecurity, the increase of the instability. So it means that it is the opposite result that we are facing. So if we would like to avoid Afghanistan case, we have to reconsider, our way of viewing the insecurity, the causes of insecurity in this region. There are many causes, and complex causes. The international actors have reduced them into migration, contentment, and the terrorism threats also. So we have time to correct, our game, and we have time also to avoid the Afghanistan in the Sahel, because the overall result showed us that we are mistaken, and we have to correct our possibility of reducing the insecurity in this region.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn back here to the board. Based on what Admiral Stavridis says, do the experts on this panel have the idea that the notion of POC and soft power is losing popularity to using force remotely?
It's losing force to?
Sorry, is losing popularity to the use of force remotely, so remote warfare, drones, when you're not necessarily having your humans on the ground.
No, it makes it different, for sure. It's more, like it says, it's more remote, it's more standoff, but it even gives more importance to protection of civilians, I think. It might not be what we see yet, but I think this is what is important, to be sure that notwithstanding the type of weapon you use, protection of civilians is a key issue, and we should give attention to it and recognize what's needed. Yes, it's something to think about, sure. That's, I can't deny, but it doesn't diminish the importance.
Yeah,
instead,
absolutely.
It should increase maybe the importance of it.
Well, and in some ways it makes it harder, right? Because you don't have the richness of ISR capabilities and all of the various things that you would have if you did have a very robust force, including humans from your own force on the ground.
Sure.
Let us see.
I'm the only one who cannot see the questions.
Trust me, you're better off. So Olivier, what are the three main practical contributions protection of civilians champions can make to security in your area or region? And then I actually want to reflect that to you as well. Go ahead.
Okay. Mm-hmm. The first one, our contribution is to help international actors to better pinpoint the areas of action in terms of civilian protection. So if you want to have added value in this region, you have also to give support to the civilian actors. I mean, the non-governmental actors like associations and NGOs also. So that's the first one. The second one, you have to build your response to the insecurity threats based on the real needs of the population. Because terrorism is a wide topic and also a threat. So you have to better understand the population's needs and give the right response to these needs. And finally, if you distinguish governance from the global support to the security forces, you can't succeed in this way. So I think that the countries like Netherlands and also some European countries have the opportunity to give us, when I say us, give us the Sahelian people an added value support in order to change the dynamics, because the way France is viewing its interest in the region, the way that U.S. government is viewing its interest is not helpful for the people like civilians and other categories of population. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question to you.
Okay. I'm already contributing, actually. It's worth to mention that my work with the government of Iraq is unpaid work. So I'm volunteer, actually. And I'm doing, 50% of my time is to the government, actually. And they are paying me no penny, unfortunately. But it's worth to say that the government of Netherlands, if we are talking about the government of Netherlands assistance, that there is a huge amount of assistance and donation coming from the government of Netherlands to the Iraqi government and to the civil society to improve the society of Iraq, and especially in topics like women empowerment and leadership. So it's worth to say that there is initiative from the government, but to improve that, we should use the best examples of successful stories. And I think for your government, you have some organization, they already have the best success stories. For instance, not because they are invite us, PAX, one of the organization that every Iraqi knows, but they are not registered. But everybody knows them because they did a lot to the country. And to be kind of the moderator for some issues like Hawija, for instance, it shows how much respect they show Iraqis. And when they are talking to Iraqis, they are not talking in behalf of your government, but they are from your government. So they are talking in human beings way to show your role, to do your role, investigate, transport, and reaching the people. So it's better to empower these organizations. This is one of the contribution for the next steps, and to empower leadership on the ground too from your government. I'm sure that you heard about the limit of our corruption cases. It's a huge, and usually we keep ourselves on the bubble of comfort. So a person like a donator, human rights stabilization donator, he knows that organization, he dealt with them before, he doesn't want to risk to deal with another organization. So this is one of the contribution that they should use multiple actors on the ground. It's not about that organization or this organization. It's about reaching as much as you can from your people or from others' people. And that's create you as a champion. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we're coming to the end of our event here, so I want to just give each of you maybe just a minute, quick minute or so to make a final point, and then I will wrap us up. Do you want to start?
I think I think first of all, no, let me say this. I think this conversation is very important and needs to continue clearly, and it helps us to really reflect on why we do the things we do, and to reflect on, at least for us, from my perspective, are we doing the right things, and are we doing the right things right? And listening also particularly to your experience, it really reconfirms a lot of the things that indeed, that we need to ask better and from the start what the needs are. To start, the starting and the end point has to be the people we protect. And that, we have the willingness to listen. I think this is something we work on in my ministry, So when we talk about peace and security, whose security are we talking about? And who can be the actors that can help us to ask the people, to ask directly to the people and make sure we respond to those needs, rather than think from our own experience or from our blueprint approaches that this is how we do protection of civilians, or how this is how we do stabilization. So yeah, I think that is maybe, do we ask the right question to the right people? That's always the question in our work. And this table really helps to reflect on that and to get new ideas on how to do better.
Excellent, thank you. Olivier?
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all of you, because it is very important for me to discuss directly with the representative of the Netherlands government. But I would like to ask you to regard me as a spokesman for the NGOs Chadian NGOs, the Sahelian NGOs that need your support in order to better help people having, the best response to the security threats. So I am a spokesman for my organization, BUCOFORE. Also, I would like to let you know that you have the opportunity to change the game in the Sahel. So do differently things, and I hope that we will resume with the security that we lost. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for the guest, actually, the government of Netherlands, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Defense, of course, they start with sharing that it's a kind of apology of what happens, but we'll wait for more results after this event, and we will follow the news to see what kind of results after this event, and we can continue for more serious events. And I think with internal elements, external elements, I found trust between the government side and external between your government and your other colleagues of countries to build that trust with people and with your colleagues as government. We are missing that, because as much as you will be transparency, you will build that wall of trust between all. Thank you.
Just about out of time, so I'm going to give you the last word here.
Very short. No, I'll end with what I started with. Protection of civilians is a theme on which we never done learning. It's about, talking between ministries. It's about experience we build, we take from previous experiences. It's about the people where we're working for and where we're doing our jobs for. And it's about discussions like this. So I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much.
All for these conversations we had today.
Yes, and for me as well, my heartfelt thanks. This was such a fantastic panel, and I know it was probably very hard sometimes to be in front of cameras and to have these really frank discussions. So I thank you. And with that, we'll wrap it up.